Hi everyone, today we are going to have a little play with some weird and wonderful embroidery threads. Welcome back to my channel everybody. My name is Sarah from Sarah Homfray Embroidery. We've got a fun video for you today, but just before we get going I want to say thank you to S. Boothford, who has donated through the super thanks button below. You can see that below the video. And I also want to say thank you to patrons and members who have signed up this month and joined us on Patreon and channel members. I do have a new video out for you. That's these wonderful little buttonhole bar roses. So if you're interested in that, you'll need to become a member or a patron. You can see the details of how to do that in the description below this video. So I thought today in this video we'd have a look at lots of interesting and weird and wonderful threads, and I've got quite a few in my stash that I've obviously bought from various places over the past, and I thought, oh, that looks really fun and that'll be great for this, and a lot of them I have never used. So I thought it would be a good time to get them all out, have a little play with them and see what they can do. So if you're a needle pointer, you will probably recognise a few of these threads, and the suppliers of them do actually say that these are good for surface embroidery as well as needlepoint. So I'm going to test that out, and I'm also going to look at them from a stump work point of view. So a lot of our recent videos about stump work, raised work embroidery, three-dimensional embroidery, and I think a lot of these, in fact all of these, would be really great for that because they make great textured and dimensional stitches. So a great one to think about if you're having a go at stump work. So I pulled out 10 different kinds of threads from my stash. Now you have probably got ones that I haven't got. I just happen to have these ones, so I'm going to try them on a little sampler. I've made myself a little sampler and I've done a few stitches already just to try it out. If you want to know about sampling and why it's important and how you can use it in your work and how you can have a go at testing some of your own threads, do check out our sampler video up here. A little bit like that. So how to sample your threads and how you can use this in your work to really help you improve your embroidery. So this is the little sampler that I am going to have a go on, and before I show you the different stitches I just want to talk about a few things to know if you're going to try out some threads. So the first thing to do, I'm just going to pick this one out here, this little mad orange boucle kind of a thread here, is to have a little investigate of what your thread is. So the best way to do that is to get the end and to pull it apart. Sacrifice a little bit of it at the end and pull it apart. Now this will tell you a few things, so it might tell you what it's made of. This is also on the label, so do check the label if it's still got the label on it, and you can just see what it's going to do when you start playing with it. So is it twisted up together? Is it really fibrous? Does it shred easily? Does it do anything else surprising? Has it got two different kind of materials that when you take them apart they'll do different things? So just have a little investigate of the end and see what's going to happen. And if I just pull this one apart, you can see how quickly that frays, and that will tell you a little bit about what it's probably going to do when you stitch with it. So well worth just pulling it apart and seeing how it's been constructed. Now there are only two ways that you can really use a thread. So you can either stitch through the fabric with it, so you thread it in a needle and you go up and down and you make your stitches, or if it's too crazy and too mad and you can't get it through the fabric, you can still use it because you can lay it on the surface and you can stitch over it, which is called couching, and there's lots of different ways that you can do that and different things you can do with it. So there's only those two things to know about really. So I recommend nice short lengths for that until you know what your material is going to do, and a nice big needle too. So I'm just going to show you the needles that I'm going to use. So this nice big chunky needle here is brilliant. This is a chenille needle, and that will become apparent later why it's called a chenille needle, but it's like a tapestry needle. It's got a point on it and it's got this really long eye. So a lot of these threads, they're quite thick, they're quite textured. You need to be able to get them in the needle easily so that they don't shred the thread before you've even started. So I've got a chenille here. Now this one is a number 22, which I thought was quite large, and I started using it and it was still a bit small. So I've pulled this one out my needle case. Don't know what size it is, but you can see it's massive, probably a couple of sizes bigger than that, so it's enormous. So the biggest one you can get I would recommend until you can until you've tried your threads out to see what they actually do. So that's a nice big chunky chenille needle. So those are really if you want to go through the fabric. If you want to stitch on top, you might need another thread, which I'll get to in a second. So I've just got some smaller embroidery needles to thread the other thread in as well. So find yourself a different array of needles if you like, some large ones and some small ones to help you experiment with your threads. So I've also got myself a couple of reels of ordinary sewing thread as well. If you want to couch something down, if you want to stitch over and stitch it on the surface, these are really good for that. They're just sewing machine threads, what you would use if you were dressmaking, but they're really nice and strong ones. They're polyester ones, so they're nice and strong, and if you can get a colour that matches your thread, then you won't be able to see that stitch over the top. So a few of those might be helpful. And the other thing is a laying tool. Now this is a Malure, this is a specific laying tool for gold work, and when I say laying tool, just helps you to lay the threads onto the surface, so you've got a bit of control over it. If you don't have a Malure, it's fine if you've got a different kind of laying tool. If you don't have any kind of laying tool, great big chunky tapestry needle will do the job as well. Don't use your scissors because you could cut the thread, but something that helps to guide it down I found was really useful, because these threads can be a little bit tricky to control, so anything you can use to help, you will find you will appreciate later. And the last thing that I just want to mention is to not be afraid to experiment with this. It may go wrong and it may shred and it all might fall out, but you also might get some really nice surprises along the way. Okay, so let's get stitching and try our first kind of thread. So the first kind of thread I thought we'd look at is kind of fuzzy, fluffy kind of threads, because you can get these in lots of different kinds. I'm just going to run through a few that I've got here. So this is fuzzy stuff. These are the needlepoint ones. If you're a needlepointer, you've probably seen these before. So we've got a sparkly one that's got a little bit of fluffiness on it. And what's great about these, by the way, is they tell you what you can use it for. Needlepoint and cross stitch. They don't put surface embroidery on it, but that's what I'm going to use it for, and they tell you underneath what it's made from and how you can wash it, so it's really useful information on these. So that's some sparkly fuzzy stuff. We've got some glow in the dark silk lame braid. So remember what I said about look at your thread and what is it? This is a braid, so it's been braided together, so it's probably going to have quite good structure on it. Again, tells you what it's made out of, so silk and polyester. So I know that that's going to be quite strong because it's got polyester in it, so that will tell me something about how much I can pull it through the fabric and how much I can't. Hand washable, test first. Lots of useful information. Then we've got this funny mad thing here, Necessities ink. This is a popular one if you're a needlepointer. So mad, you might look at that and think, oh, I'm not going to stitch with that. And I'm sure a few of you that have stitched with it will be laughing at this point, because you will know how it works. But it's got everything going on there. It's a kind of a braid, and it's got some fluffiness on it as well, and it's got some sparkle in there. So it's got some different materials in there as well. 100% polyamide on there. It tells you what that one is. So probably going to be a little bit tricky to work with. But really, really beautiful. And then the one that I'm going to have a little go at is the Angora. So this is Rainbow Angora, 100% Angora. It's absolutely beautiful. Really lovely. So needlepoint, cross stitch and long stitch. Tells you what count you can use it on as well. Really useful. 100% Angora there, hand washable in cold water. Test first. So let's see how that works on a normal surface fabric. Surface embroidery. So I'm going to try this colour here. Now if I take it off the card, it's quite thick, and I'm just going to do that thing that I told you about, pull the end apart just to see what it does, and it's very fluffy. It's beautiful, but yeah, as soon as I'm thinking I'm going to stitch with this, I'm thinking, how am I going to manage this thread? So it is twisted up. It does have a twist to it, so I know that it can come untwisted, and I don't know how strong Angora is. So I've got fluffiness to think about, I've got the twist to think about. So I'm going to use that really large needle I told you about, that really large chenille needle for this one, because I think it's not going to go in anything less. If you want to know about needles, do check out our needle video, how to choose the right one for your thread. Very short lengths. Normally fingertip to the inside of my elbow is a good guide. I'm going to go a little bit shorter than that with this, because if you use too long a thread and it all starts to shred, you just get really cross with it. So nice short threads. It threads in this needle really nicely. Actually, it's not wearing when I pull it through, which is important. I'm going to put a knot in the end. I'm just going to come underneath there. I'll finish that later, and I'm just going to try some stitches. So the first thing to do is to just try stitching with it, just see if it will go through the fabric. Just going to do a running stitch, is nice, simplest one that you can do. And you can feel what it's doing. If it's, you can hear it going through, and you can feel it start shredding, then you know that either your needle isn't big enough, even that size, or it's not really going to be suitable for stitching with, and you need to couch over it, you need to put it on the surface. That's gone really, really nicely in there. So I shall come back with another stitch. I'll do a stem stitch now. It's just come unthreaded. Now the fact that that's come unthreaded is interesting, which means it's not too tight in the needle. So it's not going to wear if it's too tight. Now when you do more complex stitches, it's going in and out of the fabric more. So here I've got out there, in there, back up there. This is doing all sorts of stuff. So it's going to start wearing the thread. So this will be where you can tell if it's going to come apart or not. It's actually really beautiful to stitch with. I don't feel any resistance. I don't feel it's shredding. Just going to look at where it's in the needle in a minute. Let's do one more stitch. Now if there's going to be a problem with it, you're going to see it here where it's in the eye, and you keep going in and out. That's where it gets the most wear and tear. I can't see any on that at all. That's stitching really nicely. So even that short length is great. It's stitching beautiful and smooth. I can't feel any resistance to it, so that's really lovely. So the key is a large needle. Make sure the needle makes the hole for the thread to pass through, not the thread. And also doing it on a fairly open woven fabric here. I've got 100% linen fabric, so the weave is wide enough for the needle to go through. It's not going to wear that thread when I go through. So it seems like that's a lot to think about, but I'll mention those things again as we look at some more threads. So just want to mention this orange one at this point here. This is this kind of boucle thread that I showed you at the beginning. It doesn't have a label on it, so I don't know what it is. It's been wound off something. And again, we looked at the end at the beginning of this video, and it sort of comes apart quite easily. And as soon as I started stitching with this, I had it in a finer needle. This is what it did. So it came apart quite spectacularly. So do be prepared for that to happen. So I could get a bigger needle and I stitch with it, and I did manage to stitch with it. I did a little bit of satin stitch. French knots is a good stitch to check things with. How well does it do a French knot? But this also tells me something else about this thread, is that I can take it apart. Look how easily it came and separated. So if I just want to take a little bit of that and just use one for something finer, I can. So some threads will strand down, and you can use the different strands and put those together and make the thickness that you want. So you've really got to look at what your thread's doing and let it tell you what it wants to do. So the next one we're going to look at is velvet, or velour, or very velvet, or it comes in lots of different names. This is what it is for the needlepoint thread. Very velvet here. Again, gives you your needlepoint and cross stitch count sizes that you can use it on. Now 100% nylon for this. So I know it's nylon. It's probably going to be quite strong because it's nylon. It's not a natural fibre that can disintegrate. And it's got this beautiful, beautiful velvet feel, and I'll show you it. A couple of others. So this is a Fleur de Paris one, velour yarn, they call it, fine mesh, 100% nylon. Weirdly, they put it in a yellow box. I don't know why they put it in a yellow box, but it's actually orange, so that's the same thing. And I've got a pink one here that's the same. I'm just going to show you that one. If I try and pull the end apart of this, nothing happens. It does not pull apart. It's really, really tough. So this is one of those nice, pleasant surprises. If you use this, you will know this already. So I'm going to try couple of stitches. Now I've already tried some fly stitch and some French knots in this, so let's try a little bit of satin stitch, I think, for this one. So just going to lay it on the top, do a little long stitch with it, come up next to it and see how that looks. And I'm hoping this will give a nice sort of velvety fabric kind of feel to it, and you can just listen for it when it comes through. A little bit of a pop as it comes through. I might want to take my needle size up. I've got the Chenille 22 for this. Stitching really nicely. It's super strong, this thread. I was really pleasantly surprised when I tried this for the first time. So it does satin stitch beautifully, and I'll just do some French knots in it. Wrap once. If you want to know how to do French knots, check out our video on it, Ultimate Guide to French Knots and what to do if it doesn't go right. It's a really useful video. So just wrap it once, back in, and when you pull it tight there, that's where there's a lot going on. It's going round in a knot and through. I'm just going to come up and do one more. round and down, and then we'll have a look at where it goes through the eye of the needle. Super nice to stitch with. This is really, really impressed. Right, now it is wearing. Can you see that there? So that's where the needle has sat on the thread, and just going through it those few times, it is going to wear where it sits on the needle. So that's something to be aware of. You can just move it along the thread if you want to try and minimize that, or just make sure your needle's near the end, and when it does that, you can finish your thread and start a new one. So that is where it gets the most wear, and it is starting to wear it that way, but it stitches really, really beautifully. And try some different threads in it, different stitches in it, and see what the thread does. I just want to show you something that I have actually used this thread for that was really, really great on surface embroidery, and that's this braid stitch. So this is a very old technique. They would often do this in gold, and I was practicing it. I thought, well, I don't want to practice it in the gold and waste the gold. What can I use that's quite stiff, that has the same sort of feel about it? And this velvet thread was beautiful, and this here and this and these two here are all done in that thread, and they're just really, really stunning. You can see that how the stitches are formed, easy to stitch with, and it holds its structure as well. So really beautiful thread for lots of different reasons. So we're going to look at chenille threads now, which is where the chenille needle comes from. Now chenille threads are from a very old kind of embroidery, and it's very beautiful, and I'd really like to do a video just about the chenille threads because it's got a really great history and some beautiful designs, but I want to just show you the thread here. So there are lots of different kinds of it. So it's basically a little bit like the velvet thread, but it's actually got a pile to it. So it's made by twisting two threads together. You trap the fibres in it that way, and you cut them off, and it makes this little furry pile. And you can get flat ones which just go side to side, or you can get it round where it twists around and makes more of a rounded thread. So there's a little bit here I can show you, like so, and if we pull the end, you'll find this comes apart really easily. So that gives my first warning sign. I've got to be super, super delicate with this one, be really careful because this is going to disintegrate. Now you can get different kinds. This is a cotton one here. We've got a silk one here. Beautiful, beautiful colours. So that's a silk one there, and I've got a little flat one here. This one is cotton as well, I think. So that's a flat one there. And then I just want to show you this one, which is the one we're going to have a go at. This is a Devere Soie one. This is silk, and this is just beautiful. And this is quite a thick one. You can see like that there. So it did stitch really beautifully. I stitched with the cotton ones, went in very, very nicely. That's the flat one, that's the rounder one. These are cottons, really beautiful. Now I've had a go with the silk, and you can see what happens here, and this is what I mean by when you experiment, be prepared for things to not quite work. So I stitched it down and I stitched over it. There's no way in the world I'm going to stitch through the fabric with the silk. The cotton went through, but the silk really, really difficult. And then I plunge the ends through afterwards, and it's all disintegrated. So you need to really think about this when you use it, and we'll try a little bit now. Where's the end? So I'm just going to pull off a little bit. So I'm just using the one that's hardest to use, basically, so you can see how you can try this. And what you need to do, and I know this from just trying it the first time, is you need to take the end through to the back first, because I'd stitched it down and I'd taken the end through, and then it disintegrated after I'd stitched it. So if you take it through first, you can decide if it's going to disintegrate or not. I've just got a green sewing thread I'm going to sew over that with. So I've matched the colour of my thread. Now, big, big needle for this. So you can either make a hole with it, like so, just part the threads and then try and thread it in the needle. We'll try it this way. This is why a sample is good. Don't try this for the first time on an actual piece. If I'm just really careful, that's just popped through like so. There's a little bit on the end, on the back, a little end on the back. Now I can finish that off later, so I know I've already done that bit. Now I've just got to stitch over it. It's not going to disintegrate afterwards, so I definitely recommend with this one doing that first to avoid any disasters. And when you go over the top of it, you just want to try and get your thread between the pile. You can see a little bit where it is, but if you just go carefully, it should just disappear between the pile of the silk. You can see how carefully I'm handling this This one is super delicate. And when you see what they made out of it, there's even more admiration for the people who used it, because this one is super delicate. So this is couching, this is just surface embroidery. I'm just laying it on the top of the surface like so. And I can continue to the end, and then I'll take that bit through to the end really, really carefully as well, and just turn the ends over on the back and sew over them. So if that one is really a little bit too tricky and you haven't got the patience for that, and you've got to be really, really careful with it, go for a cotton one, much easier to use. But you can see just by trying them, I can instantly see the differences, and I can make a decision on which one I might want to use. So we're going from quite a delicate fibre now to quite a sturdy one. So we're going to look at some suede. So this one is called Super Suede. It's not actually suede. This one, rayon and cotton and polyester. So it's an imitation one. And I think these ones probably are as well. So these are Renaissance Designs ones as well. So they're imitation suede. They're like little ribbons of leather. And if I just show you what suede is. So that's a piece of leather there. And it's the back of the leather. With the skin on the other side removed, so you haven't got that on the back and that on the front. It's this on both sides basically. It's beautiful and soft, but obviously because it's a suede, it doesn't have a thread, it's not got a twist or anything like that, so I'm expecting it to be quite strong. So I'm going to try a little bit of this pink one here. Now this goes really nicely in the needle. This is a Chenille 22. It's gone in there super easy, really nice. As I said, I can't disintegrate the end because it doesn't, not made like that, it's not fibrous, and it's stitched really beautifully. So we're just going to try the stitch on here. Now I've already tried some running stitch with it and some stem stitch, and I did do some French knots. The French knots were difficult to do. To get this round in a knot and get through it was quite hard. You need quite a loose tension. So it's worth trying different kinds of stitches because it will behave differently depending on what stitch you're doing. So let's just try a satin stitch. Now this is quite long. You can see me sort of struggling just to pull that through a little bit. So I might want a larger needle with this. Now it has twisted up, so this is a good opportunity to use a laying tool here. So I'm going to put the laying tool underneath, try and keep that flat. If you've done any ribbon embroidery, this will be familiar to you. It is a kind of a ribbon. You see how that just helps guide it down to where I want it to be. So that first one's got the twist on it. Just put that underneath there like so. You can just pull it down slowly, and that will help to pull those twists through to the back, and it lies nice and flat on the front. So I can use this like a ribbon, a plate ribbon. If you've done gold work embroidery, this will act in the same way. You could fold it back and forth on itself, and you can use the tool to guide it down. So it does work in lots of different stitches. Some it will be better for than others, and use the Malure to help you get it to what you want it to do. Tell it who's in charge. And just try some different stitches to see what it will do. And if I just bring it back to the top, let's have a look at where it goes through the needle. Tiny little bit of wear there, but that's pretty tough. That's going to go quite a long way. So I know that I can stitch with that one quite happily, or I could couch over it as well. So I'm going to have a look at a ribbon kind of a thread now. So this one is called Fleur. Got a couple of colours of it here. And also this is actually a ball of crochet thread. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this at the end, but I wanted to bring it in this point because this is also a ribbon kind of a thread as well. So let's see what this does. Again, I've tried a few stitches. I've done a stem stitch, I've done some French knots, and I've tried to use it like an actual ribbon stitch. So this is ribbon stitch, it's called ribbon stitch, and you go back through the ribbon and it curls up at the end and makes leaves. It didn't work terribly successfully. So I'm going to try a different stitch with it. So this is what it looks like. Now let's do that test on the end. Yeah, comes unravelled really easily. It's like a knitted sort of tube. It is actually a tube of thread, and that comes apart really easy. So if I catch the end of that, the whole thing's going to come undone. What's it made out of? Nylon. Cut on severe diagonal. It says severe diagonal. Does that stop it? Cut on severe diagonal. Okay, when in Rome. So let's try a little bit of that. Now the thing is with this as well is it's stretchy. Because it's a tube and it's knitted, you can pull it that way, you can pull it that way. Quite hard to stitch with stretchy stuff. I'm going to use my big chenille again. Let's cut off a slightly longer bit now, and what I thought I would try with this one is actually weaving it on the top. I'm going to do a woven wheel with it. I've put my spokes in. We've got videos on all these stitches that I'm using, by the way, so do check out our stitch library if you want to know how to do them. I'm going to cut right in the middle because I've tried some stitches with it. They're quite successful. It's quite easy to stitch with. You have to stitch it to a tension. I think it actually tells you. Stretchable tubular ribbon for needlepoint. I'm sure somewhere it said. Oh yes, use short lengths and stitch taut. So because it's stretchy, you will find it stretchy. So you need to pull on it when you stitch with it. So under that one, over, under. So I'm going to pull it around here, and I'm going to keep it quite loose. So this would be something you would use a normal silk ribbon for. And I thought this is a ribbon. Let's see what this does. I'm just going alternately under these bars, not pulling on it very tight, seeing how it looks when it's on the surface. I'm just going to go all the way around, and then we'll see what it looks like when I get to the end. It's gone round really nicely, actually. Nice loose tension on it. Really does look like a rose with a bit of sparkle. It's beautiful. And then when you get to near the end, you can just put some long stitches in it, so you can stitch with it as well. And if I leave them super loose, they make like little petals. Because of its structure, because it's like a ribbon, it will kind of, has a little bit of structure. It will stand up from the surface. So weaving it and stitching with it, actually really pleasantly surprised. Never really used this thread for anything, and it's exciting to try new threads. You know, I've really enjoyed having a little experiment with this and seeing what I can do with it. So just a couple more around there. You can feel it stretching, but it seems to be okay. The end isn't wearing at all, so that cutting diagonally seems to be the trick, like they said it would. Just going to overlap those. So really usable thread, actually really nice. Just beware of the stretch and beware of that end coming unraveled, but otherwise you can stitch it, you can couch it, you can wrap it. Really lovely. And doesn't that look like a rose? Really beautiful. So I will be using this thread a little bit more in the future, so if we do more stump work videos, keep an eye out for that one, because that one is really beautiful. So a little bit of a different thread for you now that you may not have come across so much. Maybe if you're a gold worker you might have. So this is called Gimp thread, and it comes on either reels, or I've got it in a little packet. This one is called board and cord, so it might be called a different thing, but basically if I show you what it is, so it's core thread underneath, lots of threads in fact. This one happens to be black inside, and it's wrapped very tightly with a fine thread, and originally this would have been a silk thread, and you may see this in some stump work designs, some old 17th century stump work designs, and they would use this. It looks quite weird. You think, if you're looking at it, think, I don't know what it is. It's probably Gimp, and you can see how tightly that's wrapped around there, and it makes a sort of a shiny bendy cord, if you like, but you can see how easily that unravels. So that's again something we have to be aware of when we're dealing with the end of it. So this one is going to go onto the surface. So I've had a little go of it here and just done a little bit of couching. So we're going to stitch over the top of this. And what you have to think of is, what do you do with the end? Now you can take the end through to the back. So you would need to plunge it. So this is a gold work technique where you use a lasso and you make a little loop and you pull it through to the back. This isn't going to go in a needle really. So you can either do that, or here, what I've done is I've just done some extra stitching over the end, and the whole thing is sitting on the surface. This is a lot more unstable, but a little bit easier. Taking it through to the back is a little bit tricky, but will be more stable to control the end. So you just have to choose which one of those methods you do really. But I'm just going to deal with the end first. You can see it's already unraveling, so I'm going to do myself a nice sharp cut. This one is actually white inside, interestingly, and I have myself a matching sewing cotton here. We're going to stitch over the top of it. Don't really want to see those stitching threads over the top, and I'm just going to go over the top of it like so, and then you can just pull it back and leave the end there. We'll come back and deal with the end in a minute, but just be super careful with it until you have dealt with that, because that can come unwound. It can unwind there. So just doing a little stitch over the top every so often, nice and even spacing if you can, and if you pick your thread right, these stitches should disappear. You shouldn't be able to see them. And what they did in stump work techniques, I should try and do a little bit for you quickly, is they would fold it back on itself and they would fill in spaces with it. And they often did little kind of animals with it. I'm going to cut some off so I can show you. And if you've done any gold work couching, it's the same technique as that really. So if you've done that, you will be familiar with this. I'm just going to bend it back on itself. Can you see that there? Couch over the end, nice and tight. Stitch to the outside, and then needle to the inside. That way you're not sticking your needle up through the actual gimp itself and risk damaging it. And I can just carry on and I can fill in a space. I can make some pretty patterns. It curls really beautifully, this, because it's sort of quite sculptural, this. You can make really nice curves with it. You could do lettering with it. Lettering would look great in this. So this is definitely one to go on top of the surface. You could have a go with stitching it if you want to. You'd need a mighty big needle. And I'm not even going to try stitching with it. I just don't think it will stitch. But, you know, experiment and play and see what else you can do with it. And then as we just want to show you the end, get near that. So just stitch over that end with a couple of stitches to make sure that's really secure. You could even put some stitching over it as well. If you wanted to join it onto something else, just take your threads over the end just to make sure that's secure. So not very stable way of doing it, but easier. We'll take it through to the back and use that plunging technique if you want it a little bit stabler. So quite a fun one that, and that one is called Gimp. So following on from our Gimp, this thread is quite exciting. So this is made by DMC Colour Infusions, but it's called memory thread. So as you can guess, it keeps its memory. It's a magic thread, and I'm just going to show you what's in it. 40% copper, so that is the wire that keeps the memory in it. So it's like the Gimp, but it's got a wire down the middle of it. 23% cotton, 3% polyamide in it. So comes in some pretty colours wrapped on these nice things here. So let's try a little bit of this. Now what this means you can do, this has got wire in it and the Gimp hasn't. So the Gimp makes these beautiful shapes when it's flat on the fabric. This one, you can raise it off the fabric. So you can see that I have done that here. I've just curled it up and it's actually dimensional. So if you're doing stump work, this is a brilliant one. And if they've had this in stump work times, I'm sure they would have used it. And a great way to do this is just to wrap it around a needle. You have a play and find all sorts of exciting things to do with this, but if I just wrap it round like so and then pull the needle out, it keeps its shape, hence being called memory thread. So you can just stitch that down. So I've got a thread that matches it, and again you've got to think about the end. So we didn't have a look at the end, but does unravel a little bit and I can see the copper in it there as well. So I might want to take this through to the back. Let's try that first. Get my great big needle, make a great big hole. I might be able to just push this one through because it's got the wire in it. Get the wire through, not the thread. Okay, so that's just gone through to the back, so that's the end dealt with. So we can turn that over and finish it on the back, so you can get it through to the back, and then we can just stitch over it, and we just choose where we want to stitch over. I'm going to put a couple of stitches in at the beginning. You can see it's doing its own thing. Definitely wants to be 3D, this one. But it's exciting because we can just twist it and form it and make some really interesting shapes. You could make some brilliant tendrils with this if you were doing a grapevine. You can shape it, so you can do it on the surface as well. So you could have a flat bit. I'm going to jump over there and stitch that there. And you could just couch that down just like we did with the Gimp. And then just have that little bit sticking up. So quite an exciting thread this. You could do letters with this. This would be a good one. You can make your letter first and then sew it down. So lots of options with this one. So we'll just go through to the back there. and we can just twist and shape it and sculpt it and do lots of exciting things. So a really interesting one to investigate, that one, and see what you can do. So I remember being quite excited about this fibre when I first saw it. So this one is from the US and it's called Straw Silk, made by Silk Road Fibres. You can find some stockists on their website if you're interested in this thread. Lots of beautiful colours. Look how lovely that is. It's actually made of 100% silk and it's kind of woven into a sort of a ribbon. So I can just show you a little bit of that there. So it's sort of ribbon-like qualities. The feel of it is beautiful, really, really soft and smooth and shiny. So I'm hoping this one is going to be quite good. There's a little red one there. That's the one I've used up there. So let's have a little try of it. So I've done some buttonhole, worked nicely for that. I tried that ribbon stitch again where you make the leaves, didn't really work. Actually split it down the middle. So the sort of fibres are all lying in the same direction. You can split them. So sometimes you don't know until you try a stitch. So let's try a bullion knot. Let's just push it and see what we can do with this thread, because they stitched really nicely. Even though the leaves didn't work, it stitched nice. So up where we want to start, down we want to finish, back up at the start, wrap that around the needle until it reaches the other side. Couple more. This is a good test of a thread, this one, because there's a lot going on. So we've wrapped it around there. We're going to pull that needle through all those wraps. Just going to loosen them off a bit if they're not coming through. Right, they are. Straight to the top. We make that little triangle. Looks a mess at the minute. Don't worry about that. Let's pull all those down and then gently rub underneath just to even them out. Pull on it, even them out. So there's a lot of wear on the thread in this stitch. If it will do a bullion knot, it'll do anything, basically. And that's beautiful. So really lovely thread. Done that bullion knot really beautifully, and probably better than it would in a normal stitch as well, actually. But just thinking of some other uses for it, would make nice little leaves. You could just do sort of grass with it. Thinking of that stump work again in 3-dimensional, or just adding some different fibres into your projects just to make a different look. Makes these nice straight ones. So it's just so nice to stitch with. This is, I love it, really beautiful, lovely colours as well. So that one is Straw Silk. So I want to show you a very similar thread to the silk, the straw silk, and that is called sea grass. Now the only difference that I can see is that this one is cotton and that one is silk, so 100% silk. This is 100% cotton. So it might be interesting to see how this one reacts to that one. So it's made by the Thread Gatherer. I'll put a link again below if you want to go and check those out. Lots of lovely colours in that one, and it is like a ribbon again. Probably slightly thinner possibly than the silk one. Beautiful colour. I'm going to do it. Oh, it's a purple one. I'm going to do it in this nice blue one here, and I'm just going to try exactly the same stitch, because this is a good way of comparing threads. If you want to choose one for a project and you're not quite sure, do I use silk, do I use cotton, then try the same stitch in it, and that will tell you, especially as we've just done that stitch. It doesn't feel quite as smooth as the silk, but it's going okay. Let's see if we can get those, pull those through there, just push them all the way down to the bottom, lie it down, even them out. So it's made a stitch really nicely, so it's just as nice to stitch with as the silk. It just gives you a different effect. It's not as shiny as you would expect from a cotton and a silk. You'd expect the silk to be a bit shinier, and it is a bit finer. Look, it's made a smaller bullion knot. So if you wanted a finer thread, don't think it comes in different thicknesses, but so this is a finer one, and that's done just as nice a stitch in it. We'll just try some of those long stitches as well. Again, you could use your laying tool if you want to just have a bit of control over that. And I did actually read, I think when I was looking these threads up, that some people flatten them with a hair straighteners, which is a time when you need to just double check what it's made out of, because if it's synthetic you don't want to be doing that and melting your hair straighteners. But if you wanted it to use it as a flat sort of ribbon, you can see just by using that laying tool I can make it flat. I can change how that thread looks. So just the way that you put it down, you can do different things with it. So really nice one, slightly finer, not quite as shiny, but just as easy to use. So that one is the sea grass. The last kind of thread I wanted to look at is not technically embroidery threads, but you might have lots of these and they're worth investigating. So knitting threads and crochet threads and anything like that, because there's loads of wonderful colours and textures and materials in those threads, and it's easy to think, oh, they're for knitting, they aren't any good, but we're going to try some. So let's have a look at some mad crazy ones. So look at this mad crazy one. It's just, yeah, I mean, I imagine that's make a beautiful fluffy jumper. But I'm thinking, how can we use that embroidery? And now obviously we're not going to be able to stitch really well through the fabric with that, so it's going to sit on the top. But I just tried a little bit of it. I thought, oh, that might make interesting grass. And it's sort of laying down a little bit, so you might want to experiment with how you can make it stand up. We could maybe put it that way and couch over the top of it, and you might get some interesting ideas that way. So don't just write it off because it's knitting wool, and it might suddenly open up a whole new world of threads that you didn't know you could use. We mentioned this one earlier, so this was a sort of ribbon type one here, lots of variations on that. It sort of does something a bit different in the middle, that it's woven, so I don't know how that would react, but you can put that in a needle definitely and stitch with it, and that's, I think, an interesting crochet thread as well. So probably ribbon stitches with that, or normal stitches, so a good one to try. We're going to have a go with this mad fluffy thing. So, and I've not tried this one yet, so this could go one or two ways, but look how mad crazy fluffy that is. And I'm just going to see if we can stitch with it in a needle, just because. Now what I am going to do with this, because it's mad crazy fluffy, I'm going to actually cut some of the fluffy bit off so we can thread it through the needle. I can see this getting in a mess pretty quickly, so I've got an end that I can actually thread now, so give yourself a fighting chance with this one. I don't know how this is going to work, I've not tried it, but you can thread it. It's the good news. And I don't have to put a knot in it either, so we'll leave an end on the back and we can finish that off. And let's just, I don't know, let's just stitch some running stitch with it. Oh, now that didn't do what I thought it was going to do. It's pulled all the fibres through, the long fibres, and it's made a great big stitch, which is really interesting. Stitch is okay, actually. I didn't think it was going to do that. I thought I was going to have a mad fluffy mess. So you never know what it's going to do. So this is why you need to try these things out and do your little sampler. Now, what can we do to make that mad fluffiness show? So obviously we could just couch over it. So if I just go from there to there, like so, ignore that's the beginning of my thread. So if I just did a long stitch like so, and I could couch over that, and it's obviously going to catch some of these fibres down and not other fibres, so I guess you could pull them up. I'm going to actually try and couch it with the same thread. This is a different kind of couching when you do this. You can go back over the top of it. I could imagine this just getting in a big fluffy mess and getting really annoying after a while, but you never know. You just might need that texture in something you're making, and you could make it with this. So it sort of calms it down and controls it, but there still are some mad crazy fibres coming out of there. So you could do something really interesting with that. So the point of showing you that is, don't discard all these knitting and crochet threads as just knitting and crochet threads. They might do something really exciting in your embroideries. So I've had a lot of fun playing with these different threads, really enjoyed it actually, learning something new all the time, and I have all these materials that I can use that I've not used before. So I'm going to tidy this little sampler up. I've got a really good reference here now if I want to use some of these threads again. You could have a go at a single thread sampler if you want to do loads of stitches in the same thread, see what it could do. And then I think I'm going to have a little go at a project in the middle of it here using these threads and some of these ideas, and I'll share that with my YouTube channel members and my patrons as a thank you to you for supporting me. So I hope you've enjoyed that little look at some weird and wonderful embroidery threads and inspired to go in and have a play yourself, have a root around in your stash, see what you have got, and go and have fun learning how to use those. And I didn't have a go with any linen threads in this video, so if you're interested to know what they look like and what they're like to work with, you can check out this video up here when I have a go with those on a little design that I made. And as usual, if you've enjoyed this video, do give it a thumbs up and share the embroidery love, and I will see you next time.